expensive we make fossil fuels, the less access, the harder it is for them to afford it. But certainly, no, there's nothing that's going to happen in the United States that there's no evidence of anything happening in the United States that requires any technology that we don't currently have. And that's a testament to the technology that we have to deal with the weather. Again, it's just, even if it's really bad weather, it's still weather. It's not like Zeus is just electrocuting all of us. So it needs to be put in perspective. It also needs to be put in perspective that there's by far the most, a catastrophe requires two things. It requires an outside force acting on you, and it requires you being unable to cope with it. There's some evidence that there's some danger of some sort of moderate outside force, but if we are equipped to cope with it. And certainly, it's always interesting, just as one more perspective on this, how this is looked at through an anti-industrial lens. Why aren't there more proposals for how to cool the Earth? Why wouldn't that be a better solution? I mean, if we can warm it, why can't we cool it? Why isn't that a last-ditch response? Why don't we just say, okay, there's definitely no causal relationship understanding of the contribution of CO2 to climate. And if there was, if they could really model climate, then they would have done it and they could really predict it. They can't. That doesn't mean there isn't a relationship or nothing to be concerned about, but the relationship is very poorly understood at best. So why aren't people saying, well, why don't we wait and pursue industrial energy and really make ourselves wealthy and try to help ourselves and try to help others get out of poverty? And if something really bad happens, let's use all of our resources to cool the Earth. Why isn't that even on their radar? It's because the fundamental driving force is opposition to industrial capitalism. It is not a factual analysis of what will benefit human life. In the same way, the opposition to DDT was not a factual analysis of what will benefit human life. It was an anti-capitalist ideology, motivated perspective. And in the same way, the communists were not concerned about what's really going to make people wealthy, even though they said that. They were concerned with smashing capitalism, and they said, we're going to replace this with a glorious central planned economy. And they forced everyone into it, and they murdered tens of millions of people. But it's an anti-capitalist mentality that's driving this. It's nothing to do with concern for human life. And it completely infects all the thinking. And the more you think about how would you really think about it if you cared about human life, you can see that there's no concern at all. I mean, the idea of getting all of your power from the wind is just, that's, maybe if you're living in the time of Don Quixote, but the idea that that's a modern solution is just so offensive. Yes?
I think it's really interesting that you say there's no concern for human interest, because I think it's great that you have the opportunity to move on a day-to-day basis, if you like the weather or not. But what about people who can't? What about people who have no opportunity or are stuck where they are, and they're actually feeling the effects? Like, we aren't seeing it here, but what about people who can't farm because of the droughts?
Well, so we have to look at, if we're concerned about human life, so this is a major claim of the global warming movement, is that the West is evil, not just because it's going to hurt itself with these evil pollutants, so-called.
You don't think the West is evil?
Okay, the West is engaging in, how would you regard the act? Of emitting, so we're emitting, I have a massive carbon footprint, and proudly so. How would you regard that morally?
More resources that should be allocated. Like, I'm answering your question, but like.
Okay, it's got to be a quick answer because it's her question and it's my answer.
The resources of the world are not divided up in a way that benefits everyone equally, and so I wouldn't regard it as evil, but you're clearly using more resources than are allocated to you. I am too. We all are living in this country.
The United States is the most polluter in the world, and we're least affected by the consequences.
Okay. You guys can chat afterward. So you guys can point out each other's hypocrisies afterward. But yeah, so let's address it. So we kind of raised two questions, but they're both good questions. So let's deal with both of them. But I forget. I'll deal with resources, and then I'll ask you what the original question was. So in terms of what resources, again, I want to. Unfortunately, this isn't not going to make a tape of this available, but I had a discussion of what is a resource and what isn't. But the essence of it was that it's a part of the earth cultivated and made valuable by the use of the human mind. And this is an aspect of the fact that wealth is not something that Mother Nature just bestows upon us. It's something that's created. And that's why, where do I live? I live in Southern California. Okay, Southern California is a desert. Now, it's a very, very green and wealthy desert. I'm not the wealthiest person there yet, but nevertheless, it's a very green and wealthy desert. Now, why is that? It's not because someone failed to emit coal on the other side of the world, or because they did, or it has nothing to do with that at all. It's because entrepreneurial people figured out how to bring irrigation to parts of land that were barren and that were not considered very valuable. And that's the pattern of all of the development of the West and industrial civilization, which should not be condemned by those who don't have it, but it should be emulated by those who don't have it. So the wealth that we have is created. We are not taking our clothing, our food, our energy, our shelter out of the hands of Kenyans. We have created it, thanks in large part to the achievement of the Founding Fathers to create the greatest and freest nation in history, and the economic system of capitalism that arose from it, and the whole Industrial Revolution that arose from it. And the problem in the other parts of the world is that they have not adopted that. And the whole pro-development, I'm going to call it a racket, because it is a racket. All these people who get together at the UN and talk about development or sustainable development, they don't have the guts to say the thing that Africa needs and that certain parts of Asia needs is that they need capitalism. They need to be faxed a copy of the Constitution of the United States and understand how to have a country that respects property rights and that respects the individual and his mind and his wealth creation. And instead in Africa, it's unfortunately full of mentalities that worship the group and the tribe over the individual. And therefore they give no individual property rights to land and no individual property rights to discoveries, and make it very unattractive for anyone to want to develop there because you can't count on any reliable property rights. So the solution to the problems of the third world is for them to learn to emulate us, not to condemn us. And the fact that these countries, which are run by so many different tribal dictatorships, are blaming us for any drought that they have is completely unfair to us. Why? Droughts are a part of life. So if you want to live, learn how to deal with droughts. Don't blame the people who learned how to deal with their own droughts. Okay, sorry, one more. The first question was about global warming. What was that?
I guess you just addressed it, but it was just that, I mean, you have the opportunity because we do have.
Oh, yeah, thank you, yeah. So, yeah, I guess I did end up addressing most of it. But yeah, but the opportunity, so the people I feel sympathetic for are the people who don't know any better, who don't know what the right type of system is for protecting individual rights and creating wealth. And that's why I conveyed it, and that's why I have sympathy for a great deal of people in Africa. But I have zero sympathy. I have venom for the intellectuals who keep Africa in poverty for decades by giving them handouts along with bad collectivist ideas that keep them in a tribal, primitive lifestyle. And so the opportunity is freedom. Yes?
What do you think about the people who were poisoned and killed along the oil commodity chain? What about the people?
Such as?
What about the cancer clusters in the refinery districts of the Gulf Coast? What about the communities in the Niger Delta in Ecuador whose water has been spoiled, whose livelihoods have been displaced, whose children are dying of cancer at unprecedented rates? What about the hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq who have died since the invasion of that oil-rich country?
Okay.
So part of your whole narrative is like how this makes our lives greater.
Uh-huh.
Do you take into account the lives of people who are poisoned and killed in the
Yeah.
production and refining and
Yeah,
sort of
I got it. Okay, so we've got three categories, and I think it's important because we're blending together here three categories. So we want to have a certain thing in common. They're connected to oil, but there are essential differences that if we understand them, then we see the difference. So one is people, now I don't know the truth of this, but allegations that similar to the idea that, to the fact that people around coal mines their whole life have higher incidences of lung disease.